Welcome everyone to Tales from the 90s. Your time machine back to my favorite time period, the 90s. Been off for a couple weeks, but we're back with episode number 41. We're going to September of 1998, so let's go.
Tales from the 90s never die. In our hearts they testify. VCRs and mixtape spins, where every tale begins. Tales from the crypt, marathons, wrestling wars and morning yawns. Play kickball in the street, man those days can't be beat. Tales from the 90s never die.
Got a tooth abscess I'm still dealing with, but it's not to the level it was before where all I could do is just sit there in pain. So that's why I got no podcast last week. But this week we got a lot to talk about, and I got a segment I've already filmed. I'll talk about that in a minute. But anyway, I want to talk briefly because I spend too much time on this all the time. But got a bonus episode that's coming out Friday. It's actually part 1. Part 2 will be next Friday. That is if I get these done in time. But anyway, it's my top 40 episodes of Tales from the Crypt. And the reason I split it into 2 parts is because I'm actually going to include, as long as YouTube don't block it, the Crypt Keeper segments for each episode. You know, the before he starts the story and then after the story. So it'd be kind of cool to have on there. And since I'm bad at like recapping episodes and stuff, as you've seen on this podcast, I've actually got the complete EC guide for Tales from the Crypt by, I think it's by Digby Deal. Anyway, it's a book that's got like literally the history of the comic books and Tales from the Crypt comics all the way through, you know, all the shows. But anyway, I'm going to read the recaps of the episodes from there and then give memories of the episodes for myself, so it's not just recaps. But anyway, it's going to be too long for... I calculated with just the opening and closing scenes of that would put it well over, you know, an hour and a half, and that's not even counting talking about the episodes. So I'm not going to make you guys sit through a 3 or 4 hour video, and honestly nobody wants to. So if you like Tales from the Crypt, you want to see that, and again, they're my favorite. It's not like a consensus of everybody else. But anyway, that'll be coming out Friday and the following Friday. I think that's the 15th and the 22nd. But right now we're talking about September of 1998. This is the 6th trip we've made through 1998, so we're halfway through. Once we get done with this, I was 14 years old at the time, and 8th grade had just started, and I'll talk about it in a little bit. But first I want to talk about one of the things that I was in love with, and still am, is wrestling. Pretty big month for wrestling. October, I'm talking about September, and I go into the next month. September 13th, WCW NWO Fall Brawl from North Carolina. It was the 6th Fall Brawl. And of course, this is back when they were doing the WCW/NWO events. You know, since Bischoff owned the company and joined the NWO, it's like, I can't remember exactly what happened that made him start calling it that, but it wasn't just storyline, it was, you know, marketing, because the NWO was so hot, to put it in the, you know, actual title of events was smart. But this one is not WCW's finest hour. In fact, it's been called one of WCW's worst pay-per-views. Just one of the reasons, Goldberg had won the world title from Hogan, I think back in July, and this was like the 2nd straight month he hadn't defended his title on a big pay-per-view event. Which was normal for WCW then, as stupid as that sounds. But the main event was atrocious. It was the 3-team War Games match, which, if you don't know War Games, the original concept of War Games, before they made it 3 teams, it was 2 teams, 1 person from each team would start, and there would be like a coin flip or whatever they do nowadays. I think because they got War Games now in WWE, I think they have like a match to see who gets the advantage. But anyway, someone from the other team comes in, so it's a 2-on-1 advantage, and then, you know, the teams even out, and it keeps going like that. So whatever team has the advantage at first will always have that advantage until the teams even out completely. But anyway, once that happens, it's It used to be you have to surrender. There was no pinfalls or anything, but now it's like, I think, pinfall submission or something like, yeah, pinfall or submission after everybody's in, and it's only one. It's not elimination. But anyway, they came up with this 3-team concept. You had Team WCW, and the winner of this, by the way, whoever gets the pin for the winning team gets a world title shot. So it's like, what's the point of even having teams? But anyway, Team WCW was DDP, Roddy Piper, and the Warrior. They won. They defeated Team NWO Hollywood, which is Bret Hart, Hollywood Hogan, and Stevie Ray. Boy, when you think of NWO Black and White, you just think of Stevie Ray and Bret Hart. I'm sure he complained about this and is probably rambling on about Bill Goldberg somewhere as I speak. But the other team was NWO Wolfpack, Kevin Nash, Lex Luger, and Sting. Yes, the Tomato Sting, as they call him, with the red and black face paint. But DDP got the winning pinfall, so he would get the match against Goldberg the next month at Halloween Havoc, which, as you know, is a debacle because the Hogan and Warrior crap fest went so long that they messed up everything in that most of the people that ordered the pay-per-view didn't even get to see most of the DDP Goldberg match, which actually turned out to be a really good match, but one of Goldberg's best. I know that's not saying much, but still one of Goldberg's best. But they didn't get to see it because the pay-per-view went off the air, and some markets, when it had to go off the air, it went off the air. And they ended up showing the whole match for free the next night on Nitro, and ended up having to give refunds. So a couple months at the end of '98 were really the start of the downfall of WCW, in my opinion. Started with this show. But one of the crappy things, but this is the event where British Bulldog broke his back and then ended up getting like addicted to pain pills, and really kind of led to what led to his death because of the stupid trap door that was in the ring. One of the rings, for because it had 2 rings, because I forgot to, if you don't know about wrestling, a War Games match, it actually has 2 rings with a cage that surrounds them both. But anyway, Warrior had a trap door so he could appear, which is, in a cage match, is just stupid anyway. Takes the purpose out of it. And it's like, yeah, he had a trap door there, like, none of the people knew about it. They couldn't tell that there was a door right in the middle of the ring. They couldn't feel anything different. Anyway, British Bulldog landed on the door, and because you're a wrestler, you take bumps all the time. Your body's used to a routine. You're not thinking in your head, I need to bump somewhere else because there's this trap door that's got hinges and stuff on it, and it's probably a little raised or a little lower depending on whichever way it was. So you're not thinking that, don't bump near here, and then it's so ridiculous that they even did that. I don't know why they needed a trap door for stupid Warrior, so he can freaking take the easy. I don't know. I don't even know how he got under there. And yeah, the match British Bulldog was in, he was teaming with Jim Neidhart to take on the Dancing Fools, Alex Wright and Disco Inferno. So, what an important match for him to break his back on. Tails down there barking. He don't like it either. But on September 19th was ECW Ultra Clash. It was the second and final Ultra Clash. It wasn't a pay-per-view. It was filmed at the ECW arena and actually made up the 3 episodes, 3 weeks of ECW Hardcore TV. Let's see. The event had no titles on the line, and the main event was RVD, Sabu, and Masato Tanaka taking on the Triple Threat, which was Chris Candido, Shane Douglas, and Bam Bam Bigelow. It was a 6-man tag team match. It ended in a no contest when the Dudley Boys, the BWO, Taz, and seemingly everybody came down and ruined it. It was typical ECW ending to a match. I think it was a lot of what held ECW back, besides the financial issues, was a lot of their shows would end like this. Yeah, the fans get to see all this brawling and all this other cool stuff, but at the end of the day, it's how many matches with no contest can you have before people start thinking, well, these matches don't mean anything. Spam calling me. these matches don't mean anything. It's just they should just have everybody, like, we're gonna call everybody out now for a fight. Is what they should have done. But like I said, it was chaos, and some of it was good, but after a while, it just got to be like, this is the same thing all the time. We're not, especially with these multi-man matches, like when there's no titles on the line, usually it's like, we're not getting a finish to this. But then on September 27th, WWF had Breakdown In Your House from Ontario, Canada. It was the 24th of the In Your House pay-per-views, and the name was obviously based on DX, Break It Down. The opening match, Owen Hart defeated Edge when a debuting Christian appeared at ringside, which distracted Edge, and then Edge ran after him. That was the start of their story, which they ended up changing, I think. But yeah, that was one of Edge's very first matches and Christian's first appearance. Bradshaw defeated Vader in a Falls Count Anywhere match, and this was the final WWF pay-per-view, and might have been his final wrestling pay-per-view at all, unless he did one in Japan or one of those type things. I don't know. He might have been on it. I don't think he was on a WWE pay-per-view. He made a couple appearances on Raw, I think. But yeah, Vader's one of those ones. A lot of people say Shawn Michaels held him down, and I think there's been evidence to support that. It's just, plus Vader's history of not working well with others, just what could have been. He was a huge deal in WCW, like one of the first superstars that when I started watching WCW was Vader, like Big Van Vader as he was called there, like this tremendous heel, like scary. You always wanted Sting to beat him. But the main event of this show was a triple threat match for the WWF title. It was Stone Cold Steve Austin against Kane and Undertaker, and of course, typical Attitude Era WWF then pay-per-view. There was stipulations involved. Undertaker and Kane weren't allowed to win the title by defeating each other. They had to pin Stone Cold. And if anybody interfered to help Stone Cold, Steve would lose his belt immediately. So that was the stipulations. And then the finish of it, Undertaker and Kane double choke slam Stone Cold and then both pinned him. And referee couldn't figure out what to do. So Vince came out and took the belt and ran off with it and saying it's mine. But the next night, he decided that at the next pay-per-view, it was going to be Kane against Undertaker for the title, and Stone Cold Steve Austin had to be the referee. So, of course, sticking it to Stone Cold again. But anyway, this is the famous Raw where Stone Cold rushed the ring with the Zamboni, and also after he got hauled off by the cops, Vince thought that Undertaker and Kane couldn't see him, and he flipped him off. They caught him, and then they ended up breaking his ankle, which would, of course, lead to him going to the hospital. I don't know if it was next. It might have been the next Raw. I can't remember if it was the next Raw or the Raw after that. But, of course, the famous scene with Mick Foley and the Clown and coming up with Sacco, and then Stone Cold with the bedpan. Just some iconic moments of Raw from 1998. You just can't get enough of those. But a couple other title changes that happened. September 14th, Billy Kidman defeated WCW Cruiserweight Champion Juventud Guerrera on Nitro. Loved the Cruiserweight division for everybody from that time period. November 21st, Jacqueline defeated Sable to win the vacant WWF Women's title. It was on Raw. They had just brought that back because, of course, it had been vacant since 1995. That was a famous time where Alundra Blaze left the company and then dropped the title in the trash can on Nitro. So they decided to bring back the title with Jacqueline and Sable. Well, you had one wrestler there. At least the right wrestler got it, until Sable won it a couple weeks later. And X-Pac defeated WWF European Champion D'Lo Brown on Raw. Everybody remembers D'Lo Brown in the European title, where he'd pretend to be from a different country each week. That was some hilarious stuff. But right now I'm going to jump to a thing that I've already shot. I was looking... After last week's episode where I filmed episode 41 of the podcast, I had went to get my memory card out, which is kind of like spring loaded in my camera. So when you push it, it kind of pops out, but it usually just comes out. This time it like flew out, hit the floor. I couldn't find it anywhere. I was searching through this box of stuff, like important papers and everything else that was under my desk. Ended up finding it on the floor off to the side. But anyway, I found my yearbook from 1999, well 98, 99, from this school, this year when the school started. So I actually shot a thing where I kind of go through the yearbook and talk about some of the memories of the teachers and some of the crushes I had on. It ended up being I had a crush on this girl, and telling a couple stories. Sorry if it's a little too long, and if you're listening to the podcast and you can't see in this, I'm sorry. I'm actually going to put just the yearbook stuff on. I might put it on YouTube, but it'll definitely be on Facebook, individual outside of the podcast. But I'm also putting it in here because it goes with the theme. I found it last week, and actually, I randomly picked the month and years that I do for these, so it wasn't like I'm gonna use this next week. But it just so happened it'd be 1998 and September when the school year started, so it was like perfect. But anyway, this is my 1999 school year, 8th grade, whatever, Norwood Middle School yearbook. Alright, for those of you watching the podcast, this is the segment where I'm showing you my yearbook from class of 1999. The podcast, of course, we're in September 1998 when the year just started. Now, this is my yearbook, but I wasn't ever rich enough to afford the yearbook, so I think me or one of my brothers found this later on or something, so I didn't actually buy this one, but it's from my 8th grade year, and of course I was failed 7th grade, so this isn't the class of people that I originally was with, like when I joined Norwood View Elementary School in, I don't remember what year it was, but it was 3rd grade. But anyway, this is the 8th grade yearbook, like I said, and for you, those of you watching the podcast, if you're listening to the podcast, which is probably only Josh on Spotify, you're going to have to watch this part of it, or I'll try to describe it. And also, this is going to be its own individual video on, just on Facebook, I guess. But anyway, I'm just going to kind of go through this and give some memories, and hopefully you can see everybody here. This is Norwood Middle School here. Great big building. It was the high school at one point. Then they built a new high school next to it, and they had like a bridge that joined them, and the cafeteria was in the high school, and the planetarium, which is pretty cool. But yeah, this was the original high school. And I'm not gonna not gonna show like every page, stuff's falling or something. Try to point out some people. Now, a lot of these people I don't remember. A lot of them I didn't know. I know I should be more professional, have all this stuff uploaded and everything, pictures and stuff, but anyway, let's quickly through this. There's the principal. I was in his office a lot. Actually, I was in her office a lot because she was the assistant principal for the cluster I was on. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, in our school it was separated into clusters, red cluster and blue cluster for each grade. And if you started in one cluster, like, I think I started 6 blue. So next year I went to 7 red, but I failed, so I went to 7 blue. So the next year I was in 8 red. But anyway, it's just, since there were so many kids, it's just a way to keep it separated. Each cluster has its own teachers. Yeah, it has nothing to do with like grades or anything like that, because I'm sure if it did, I'd be in the bad one. But yeah, I've been in both the assistant principal's office and the principal's office. But now we're going to get into the teachers. Let's see. Oh, I know you'll remember her, Josh, and maybe Travis. Mrs. Brim from the library. She was actually in Norwood View, our elementary school's library, and then she moved to the middle school. I think not when I moved, but it might have been after, because I think Josh had her for a while too. I'm sure he remembers those Goosebump books he took. I've told that story on here before. Anyway, let's go through these teachers. I'll try to give some thoughts of them. There's just a bunch, like Mr. Athey, I remember him. And then there's Mr. Bolser. He was so I can't remember the exact grades for some of these, but he taught social studies. Let's see. Mr. and Mrs. Bretts. We always made fun of them because, like, it seemed like they wore each other's, like, clothes, it seemed like. I believe Mr. Bretts was 6th grade and Mrs. Bretts was 7th. I can't remember exactly. Again, there's Mrs. Brett in the library and loved her. Mrs. Calkins, I had her for math. There's Mr. Charlton, our computer teacher. Man, I love that. Learned how to type in there back when it was just typing computers. And then, of course, later on when we got to high school, there was the Introduction to Internet class, if you believe that. They actually taught you how to use the internet because it was, like, new. And my first experience with the internet, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I mean, nowadays, I'd probably take it for granted. I just get on the computer, go to this, go to that. But, I mean, back then, I didn't think I have an internet at home, so it was, like, the greatest thing in the world. Mr. Cooper. There's Mr. Cox. I've told stories about him before. He's the guy that got me to go to his church, which Marky Foe put an end to that because he had to have beer cans out all over the porch, and the church people, when they dropped me off, kind of said something about it, so he went off, you ain't going back there anymore. But anyway, he was the math teacher. He was hard on me, but he was also one of the most caring teachers because I've told this story before. I got made fun of because my shoes were from Payless, if you remember that store. Everybody else had all the good shoes like Nikes and Asics and Adidas and all that stuff. So he'd heard everybody making fun of me. Plus my shoes were kind of old too. So anyway, one day he'd put a pair of Adidas in my locker. And, he also, he's like, oh, there's my stupid phone going off. I forgot to shut it off. Law and Order's not after me. But anyway, he was like, I forget exactly what he said. He didn't make it sound like, here you go, I feel sorry for you, but, you could tell he did. Looking back on it now, he was like one of the greatest teachers I ever had, and I always remember that. Now, let's see here, we got, Mr. Gabbard, he was the health teacher, and also, this class called Conflict Resolution, I think I had in 6th grade. I remember that well. No, he wasn't the teacher for that. That was another person. He was only there for a year. Sorry. Anyway, he was the health teacher. I'm trying to, remember this stuff as I go. Oh, boy. There's Mr. Heisel. And there is, as I thought as a kid, the world's hottest gym teacher. Mrs. Kazmaier, who married Mr. Heisel. I think I told that story before. Broke all our hearts. I actually got into a fight with a friend over her. Stupid, he was like, she's my girlfriend, and we were in 7th grade when this happened, so it wasn't like we were little kids. We were being stupid, and he said something. We literally got into a fist fight and stopped talking to each other over her. I don't remember the exact details, but it was over her. And no, neither one of us she wasn't inappropriate or anything like that. None of our teachers are like that. Like you see all in the news now, it seems like every day a teacher's getting arrested for sleeping with a student or something. I mean, I'm sure it happened, but I'm pretty sure it didn't happen at our school because something like that would have happened, it would have went everywhere. But yeah, she was like every boy's crush in that school, I swear. Let's see here. I remember some of these people, it's just Mrs. Ondash, the French teacher. I hated the class because I hated trying to learn French. I passed the class somehow, but I don't remember anything. Law and Order's not after me, I swear. Let's see here. Any more that I remember for sure? Like I said, some of these are just I just remember them, but some, I remember them being teachers, but I don't have individual memories. Now we're getting on the students. Let me scan these quickly as I go through. I'm not going to talk about everybody, but there's a few I want to talk about. That is Christopher Ayers, which I've discovered since then, because a lot of these people I weren't friends with because I didn't have many friends because I was a dork. But anyway, I've discovered that he runs, or I don't know if he runs, but he's part of the people that are associated with Ascend Pro Wrestling in Norwood, which is where this high school is. So it's pretty cool that he's in the wrestling business, and so am I. I actually seen him, even though I didn't even acknowledge that so I was like, his name sounds familiar, because he used to go by Christopher, but now he just goes by Chris, I think. But anyway, yeah, he works with Ascend Pro Wrestling in Norwood. So it's kind of cool we both ended up in the wrestling business, and I had no idea he even was into wrestling then, or we would have been hanging out all the time like I did with some of these people. But let's see, I'm trying to scan here. Brian Burt. He was a school bully. He freaking chased me home half the time from school. I knew I was going to get into some of them. Let's see here. Oh boy, there I am. Me and all my dorkiness. Hopefully the camera's... I remember that freaking shirt. It was because we didn't have really choice of clothes. You just got whatever we got, like hand-me-downs or stuff given to us. It was a freaking St. Louis Cardinals shirt. And I get taken a picture in the yearbook wearing a Cardinals shirt. How embarrassing. By the way, the circles, if you see any circles around it, they're not like... I don't even have memories of those two people that are circled there, and I'm circled. Because like I said, we found this, so this stuff was always... I'm kind of wondering why I'm circled. Like... Was I like the dork gang? Was this somebody's hit list? I don't know. I'm kind of worried that I'm circled. But, let's see here. Allison DiPiano. I see it's like, well, had a crush on her. There's certain girls you had crushes on. You always wonder where they're at now, but... Let's see. Anybody else on here that I recognize off the top of the bat? Don't think so. So we'll go on to the next page, see if we got anybody. Andy Fitzpatrick. I remember him. He was one of my friends. Like we didn't have like super close friends, but you know, just people you talk with during school. Let's see. There's Brian. He was probably my closest thing to a best friend. We were like complete opposites, like music, like you can't even tell, but he was always wearing ICP shirts and stuff, and he was into that type of music. But the thing we bonded over was wrestling, especially like ECW and stuff. He's the guy that I went over and fought at can't remember the other guy's name, the guy that had the house right across from the school. But he's the one that we went over and wrestled on the freaking flaming mattress of death. I always wonder what happened to him. Wish we could have stayed close. But yeah, we were, I wouldn't say acquaintances. We were definitely good friends. It's just, I didn't have many friends then. As you can tell, I ain't got many now. There's Michael Hoff. I was surprised to find out he was in the same grade as me because he was like one of the smart kids. We were in elementary school together, and we hung out. I went to his house a couple times. Of course, I wasn't allowed to go to anybody's house hardly ever. But it was me, him, and somebody else. I went over to his house because he lived close to the middle school when they were doing the orientation. And then I would go over to his house in the mornings, watch VR Troopers and Power Rangers, and he'd watch Pokemon, just stuff before school. Back in 6th grade, whenever we first started the 6th grade. Let's see if there's anybody else I recognize on here. Again, sorry for this weirdly shot video. I think there's another page, a couple more pages. There's, of course, the no photo available slot that you always ended up getting. Let's see. There's Mary Miller, had a crush on her. There's Jeremy Monjar, had a crush on his sister. I'll talk about her in a minute. It's like, is this just your crushes? But anyway, me and him were bonded over wrestling too. I went over to his house once. It was like the time that Marky Foe literally told me to leave. I was in like 8th grade, obviously. Or it might have been, it was either 7th or 8th, because I met this group of kids, like I said, when I failed 7th grade, so it was 7th and 8th grade I knew him best. But anyway, he literally threw me out, so I went over to his house and we like wrestled all day. Is that all you do is wrestle? Yes. Ain't like I just got into wrestling 10 years ago and started trying it. I've been watching it forever. There's Valen Meyer, another one of everybody's crushes. But when I say these people were my crushes, I probably never even said 2 words to them. I was so embarrassed to even talk to them. So it's not like they would even know me, or maybe they would be like, "Oh, that's that dork." I guarantee you they would. Let's see, anybody else on here? Did I recognize off the top of the head? I don't think so. I think there's one more page. Again, sorry if this ain't the most entertaining stuff. I think that's Chris Ayers there. Yeah, he was a jock, so I definitely wasn't hanging out with them, even though I was into wrestling. It wasn't the same as the football players and the actual wrestlers on the school wrestling team. I really didn't fit into any cliques or groups or anything. It was just always I hung out with these people because they liked wrestling, and that was about it. Can't really call it like a group or a clique or anything. Brittany Wise. I remember her. I had a huge crush on her too. I swear. That's all life is in school, is whatever friends you can find and whatever crushes you can have. But anyway, 7th grade, there's only one I'm gonna point out here that I even remember, because I don't remember anybody from there other than the reason I'm pointing this person out. That is Jessica Monjar. She's on my Facebook, but I don't think I've ever talked to her. I only even met her, like I said, she was my friend Jeremy's sister, but I only ever met her in summer school, because we were in the same summer school class, even though we were in different grades, because no, actually, I take that back. We were in separate grades. But anyway, we met in the same summer school class. We were in the same summer school class. Anyway, I had a huge crush on her. You knew that was coming. But anyway, yeah, all these people in here and all these crushes and all this stuff, but yet I never once had a freaking date in that school. Not one. Not one girlfriend, not one. In fact, I would tell a story when I put go on the last page here, because it's empty. Even if it would have been mine and I could have afforded it, nobody would have signed it. But anyway, we'll put it on the cover while I tell this story. I ain't showing my face until I get back to the podcast. Anyway, it's been 16 minutes. I'm sorry it's been so long. But anyway, where was I going with that? I swear, I am scatterbrained today. Oh yeah, I can't remember the girl's name, but it was, she had to be in here, and I'm gonna find her. And I'll put the camera back on her. I'll be back in a minute. Alright, one quick story before you check out the last of this yearbook. I searched the thing and couldn't find her. The girl I'm gonna tell the story about. I can't remember her name. I think she might have been like my original grade or a grade above me. But I remember all through a couple years even of middle school where these people were telling me, this girl wants to go out with me, this girl, and like it became like a joke and trying to get me to ask her out, and she said no, and they kept like she's just playing hard to get and all this stuff, and like she eventually found out about the joke and like told the kids off, and, you know, she was sweet about it, but this is like, that's how cruel kids can be sometimes, you know. Doesn't matter the time period, and it's like I mean, I can't even tell in words like yeah, she wants to write you a note, she's too shy and all this stuff. It's like, it was so ridiculous looking back on it now, but like I said, I had, you know, no girlfriends, nobody wanted to date me then or now. I don't think my wife wants to date me. But anyway, like it, you know, it was just like, it's like, wow, people are so cruel that they're gonna make up this whole story and go on with it for like months and months just to humiliate somebody. It's like stupid. But anyway, I'm not trying to make this all upsetting, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I'm going to get this last page. It's the year in review. This thing will focus. Favorite television show, Dawson's Creek. Definitely wasn't mine. Mine was probably WCW Monday Nitro. But by the way, I went back and when I was looking for that girl, I couldn't find her. But I noticed 3 or 4 kids had NWO shirts on. And I didn't even know any of them. It was like, we could have been friends. We're watching the same thing. Anyway, favorite movie, Rush Hour, which will be coming up in the podcast. I'll be talking a little bit about that because that came out this month, actually. Favorite actor, Jim Carrey. Definitely. I have to look back to see if Rush Hour would be my favorite movie of the school year. Probably not, because there was probably other ones I like better. But favorite actor, Jim Carrey, I definitely would have went. Favorite actress, Sarah Michelle Gellar. Of course, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I think I Know What You Did Last Summer had been out already. Favorite sports team, the Denver Broncos. That's just everybody because they won the Super Bowl. Everybody's like, oh, you're the... But I mean, they were popular then. It shows you how bad the Bengals weren't the pick. Bengals or the Reds are like, no, the Denver Broncos. But I mean, John Elway, couldn't beat him. Favorite sports event, Super Bowl, of course. Favorite song, God Must Have Spent a little more time on You. And favorite music group, NSYNC. I wasn't listening to them at all during that time. I didn't really get into them until the end of 99, beginning of 2000, when I started getting into NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys. Biggest news of it, Bill Clinton's impeachment. Yep. If this had been a couple years before, it would definitely have been the OJ thing. But yeah, that's just a little snapshot of my yearbook and stuff. Like I said, I found it. Or my brothers found it, one of the two. Didn't actually buy it, but yeah. Norwood Middle School. I got despite all the crappy memories, I still got a lot of good memories from there. I'm gonna play innocent victim here. Oh, everybody picked on me. I definitely caused my fair share of trouble, and was in the principal's office all the time, and the counselor's office, and probably had me on several lists of whatever the freak. But anyway, that's my yearbook. Enjoy. I hope it wasn't too long. Going down memory lane. That's what we do on here. You know, I don't just give the facts that everybody knows. I give my own personal stuff. You know, if you don't know me, who cares? You can skip it. But anyway, back to the stuff everybody knows. Books. And another kind of thing that fell in line. A book that came out in September of 1998 by Stephen King was called Bag of Bones. And I've been listening to the audiobook of it, and I'm getting ready to start the last disc. And I've read this book before a few years ago, so it's not my first time. And of course there was I think it was a mini-series based on it that I've seen once, but I'm going to have to watch again after I'm done listening to this. But it's a really good book. It's the basic story is there's this guy and his wife gets killed in the parking lot, and he finds out that she was pregnant, which they'd been trying to have a kid and hadn't been able to. But anyway, he's a famous writer, which Stephen King writes a lot about writers. I mean, write what you know. But anyway, they had this home on this dark score lake, and they were it was called Sarah Laughs was the name that was given to the house, and it was based on it was called that because of a distinctive laugh that this woman had. Her name was Sarah Tidwell, and she was black. And I'm not saying that because she was black. It's because it's part of the story. But anyway, you come to find out later on that she was actually murdered, and her son, when she was being, I can't say the word on here because I'll get banned or something, but rhymes with grape, by these people that lived there just because they didn't like her and they're sick in the head. But anyway, she put a curse on this not really a town. It's called the TR. It was like a land tract or something. I can't remember what the TR stands for. But anyway, one of them places in Maine. If you're from the New England area, you probably know about those things. They don't have that stuff here. But anyway, just basically everybody in this lake town that they would literally kill their own kids. They would name their kids with a K name. Not everyone, but they would it'd be like they wouldn't even know that they're doing it because of the curse of Sarah Tidwell. So they would be killing them, and it just so happened that the main character Mike, his wife died. Come to find out that he was actually related to these people and didn't even realize it. But the baby that his wife was pregnant with, they were gonna, I think they're gonna call her Kaya, and it's again started with a K. But anyway, the story moves along. After his wife dies, he moves there and he starts finding this stuff out. His wife's ghost starts talking to him, and the ghost of Sarah. But he meets this woman named Maddie who has a son named Kyra, or a daughter named Kyra, and her husband had died, and her father-in-law was like this rich, evil guy that was trying to take her, and she lived in a trailer park, and he was rich, so obviously he was gonna use his money. Anyway, he had this daughter that he didn't even acknowledge as his daughter for some reason. It was just his assistant. But anyway, she was like this evil woman named Roguette. And, Mike had originally seen Kyra in like walking down the roads. And all the townspeople are on the old guy's side because they're all related. And, Mike come to find out that his great-grandfather or his grandma or somebody in his family married into the family of one of the people that are cursed in the town, one of the people that were involved in the murder of Sarah Tidwell. But anyway, sorry, taking forever to explain this. Like I said, I'm not good at recaps. But anyway, he's rich, so he was trying to help her win the custody, and old Max DeVore, which was the old guy, the father-in-law, didn't like it, so he was dying anyway. But there's at one point him and Roguette were like throwing rocks at him and ended up like almost killing him in the lake. He got out of that, and of course he couldn't go to the police because the police in the town were on the old guy's side anyway. But anyway, a bunch of stuff happens after the old guy dies. I guess some of the people in town hire some of the younger people, and they actually try to kill. They do kill Maddie because they're trying to kill Kyra. And Mike takes her to Sarah Laughs, the house, and there's like this huge storm going on, and he'd finally figured out from his wife Jo, what to do. Got to dig up the bones of Sarah that was buried outside by a tree and like burn them. But Sarah didn't like that, so she showed up, and it was just crazy. And in the end, Mike and Kyra ended up. It ended with like Mike getting visitation because even as a rich person, he's still a single male, so they're not just going to give him custody of her, especially since they weren't related. But it makes it seem like at the end of the book that eventually he'll get custody of her. But it's a really good story if you haven't read it. Particularly the audiobook is really cool. It's like specific. Stephen King reads it, and also they like include like music, like the song that Sarah used to sing back in the, I think it was early 1800s, maybe early 1900s. It might have been the 1800s. But anyway, they like come up with like a whole song and have her like singing throughout the thing. It's really creepy. Like, really a good way to do an audiobook. But anyway, that's Bag of Bones by Stephen King. Make sure you check that out. Sorry, this podcast is going to be a long one. But a couple other books that came out. Give Yourself Goosebumps, number 30. Your Plant Food. I'm currently reading number 2 right now, TikTok, You're Dead. This, of course, the Give Yourself Goosebumps is like Choose Your Own Adventure, where you start a story and you make a choice, and then you go down different paths and you keep choosing, and most of the endings are not good. You die or get stuck somewhere. They have like 1 or 2 good endings. I haven't reached one in that yet. And then book number 9 from the Goosebumps 2000 series, when they were trying to bring back just the regular Goosebumps, but of course everybody's calling everything Goosebumps or calling everything something 2000, even back in 1998, because that was the thing to do, because 2000's coming up. But that was called Are You Terrified Yet? Now we'll move on to music now. The number 1 song on the Billboard Hot 100, what I actually liked, from believe it or not, since I didn't like anything on the pop music, but you couldn't escape this song. It was number one for the whole month for 4 weeks. Aerosmith's I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. I believe it was their only number one single, or up to that point it was, after, you know, all those songs they had out in the 70s. But of course, obviously the main song from the Armageddon soundtrack, which I love the movie. And I love the song, you know, it was like one of the first songs that wasn't country that I liked. Of course, Mark Chestnut, country singer, ended up doing a version, which I heard later he didn't really want to do, but it was a popular song, and it was good. It's just, you know, didn't seem like something he wanted to do, but became one of his biggest songs, so of course, you know, he sings it in his shows, but you couldn't escape that song. Just great, you know. Like I said, I like the song, so that tells you something, since I didn't like that kind of music at all at the time. Now, of course, I do, but... in the American Country Countdown, Jody Messina's I'm Alright, which was, of course, written by Phil Vassar, it was number one for a week, and then also 2 weeks back in August, so it was number one for 3 weeks total. And then Brooks and Dunn's How Long Gone was number one for 3 weeks after that, so a couple great songs there. And they actually had the CMA Awards back when that show was watchable. Back when that music was listenable. But Entertainer of the Year, big surprise, Garth Brooks. This was 1998, double live. It either come out or was gonna come out. But I mean, he had the Central Park concert with 1 million people in Central Park, New York City, the year before. That huge world tour he'd been on. Sevens had come out. Of course, he's gonna be Entertainer of the Year. Album of the Year was Everywhere, Tim McGraw. That is definitely a great album. That's going to be on one of my episodes of Tales from the Albums, which is another plug for one of my shows on here. But it's where I give a little bit of a detailed look at an album that was like very important to me, or that I really liked. My first one was Randy Travis's The Storms of Life, which completely changed country music. The one that I've recorded by just haven't put online yet is Garth Brooks' debut album. But Everywhere by Tim McGraw is definitely making it. Not just, I think it was like 6 singles from the album were, you know, not just huge hits, but big hits. I said that wrong, big hits, but huge hits, whatever. Anyway, but the album tracks on it, like, there's not one bad song on the album. But anyway, Male Vocalist of the Year, George Strait, of course, King George. Female Vocalist of the Year, Trisha Yearwood. I believe How Do I Live, it either come out or was coming out, of course, from the Con Air soundtrack. This was definitely a time period of, you know, especially with My Heart Will Go On with Titanic, the time period of soundtracks having like this big song and it becoming like, you know, important to it, and you're releasing soundtracks. This is definitely that time period. But Vocal Group of the Year, the Dixie Chicks. Vocal Duo of the Year, Brooks and Dunn. Of course, they had a stranglehold on that since they started in the early 90s until Montgomery Gentry finally started winning it, because they had other people listed, but half the people you never even heard of before. It's just like you know, Brooks and Dunn's gonna win this. We got to give some. They always had the Bellamy Brothers on there, but they ain't had a hit or even a song out since like the 80s. They're just like, oh, they had a concert, so we'll put them on there. Let's see. This is an interesting one. Single of the Year and Song of the Year. Single of the Year is all about the song and how it performed online. Really? Come on, this ain't 2025. This is 1998. How it performed on the air, on the radio. And Song of the Year is more about like lyrical content and goes towards the songwriters, while the Single of the Year goes to the singer. Single of the Year was Holes in the Floor of Heaven by Steve Wariner. Song of the Year was Holes in the Floor of Heaven, written by Steve Wariner and Billy Kirsch. A huge year for Steve Wariner here. This was when he had a comeback, and this was like, you know, because he'd been big in the 80s and kind of went away, but in the late 90s, he really had a resurgence. Almost won Vocal Event of the Year, too. But yeah, that song was absolutely huge. The Horizon Award went to Dixie Chicks, and which of course is, you know, the new artist type award. The other nominees for this were Trace Adkins, Jody Messina, Michael Peterson, and Leanne Womack. All great singers. I think of all those, the one that had the longest career was probably Trace Adkins. But Dixie Chicks was definitely a good choice. Of course, everything that happened with them in 2001, where they, after 9/11, and then they criticized George Bush over in England, which is kind of really stupid today to think about it. Like criticizing a president, like literally everybody does that now. But it was just I think it was the timing, because of 9/11. Everybody had that huge patriotic swell because of what happened, and the fact they were over in England and said it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. People were burning their CDs and stuff. I never really did that, I didn't like what they said and thought it was stupid, but at the same time I didn't stop listening to their music either, and it really derailed their career. But then again, they also went to pop and away from country too, because the country radio wasn't playing them anymore, which I don't blame them. It's just all around a crappy situation. And like I said, I didn't really agree with what they said, because they didn't want us to go to war, and really what else could we do after that? I know talking about 9/11 in 1998, but what else could we do? Sit back and do nothing? Then he would have been criticized too. So with some presidents you can't help them. With some presidents, they're maniacs, and I'm not trying to get all political and tell which one's which. I'm just that's the way it is. Politics these days. We're never going to see I was going to say we're never going to see a president like JFK where everybody loves, but then I remember not everybody loved JFK either. So the day we ever find a president where the vast majority of people agree with everything they do, then we'll be in good shape. But that'll never happen, because everybody's got to be on this party or be on this party, or you're on the left side, the right side, whatever. If enough people sat in the middle and then picked the stupid sides, then maybe we'd have good representation. But anyway, that's political. Talking about music. Back to music. Music video of the year was "This Kiss" by Faith Hill. That was definitely a popular. I remember all the time that being on CMT and TNN then, the National Network. I always say that wrong. The Nashville Network. It became the National Network. I always say the wrong name. But music event of the year, which was always like a duet or a group of artists, went to Patty Loveless and George Jones. "You Don't Seem to Miss Me." I am in love. I'm in love with you. There's certain songs you love. I'm in love with this song. One of my favorite songs of all time. Josh Turner did a really good cover of it, and it's actually in my key, so I can sing it on karaoke. But yeah, just that song was amazing. It should have got more recognition than it did, even though it won an award. And then they had CMA has the Country Music Hall of Fame, and they announced their inductees. George Morgan, which is Lori Morgan's father. Don't know much about his music. I know he was a huge star of the Grand Ole Opry. He was. There's a lot of artists that had successful careers. Putting out singles and albums and awards and all this stuff. And then there's the ones that didn't have as much success, but they're more known for being there almost every week at the Grand Ole Opry. He was one of those ones, just like with Jeannie Seely. I think she just passed away, I think, a couple weeks ago, and she was one of them ones that was always on the Grand Ole Opry. Even in very later years, she was still on there. Elvis Presley, which king of rock and roll, even he went in the Country Hall of Fame because he did a lot of country music and a lot of country music covers. And of course you wouldn't call some of his stuff country, but if you listen to some of it, it really is in the country vein, and it's all, it all goes back to the same types of music. We've strayed way far from that. Now we got all this electronic crap and auto-tune, and can't even use a real drum set anymore. You use stupid electronic beats. We've gotten away from actual music into just crap made on a computer and fixed by a computer instead of real people playing real instruments. It's stupid. But anyway, the third inductee was Bud Wendell, who was I think the president of the Grand Ole Opry or something. I was surprised to find he's still alive. He's 98 years old. And finally, Tammy Wynette, which of course, absolute legend. Can't remember if that might have been the year she died. I can't remember. But a horror story with her with that guy she married. I mean, she had a bad enough life with George Jones. Those two just were like oil and water. But that idiot she got with, that kept pumping her full of freaking pain drugs. And there's documentaries on that, and they just had I think it was called George and Tammy. Almost had a different title on Showtime, which is on Paramount Plus. It was a mini-series just going through their lives, and you can see what happened with Tammy Wynette later in her life. Just that idiot she married really pisses me off. Anyway, we're going to move on to the Nickelodeon lineup, something that probably didn't piss me off. We're randomly pick a day. We're going to look at the last day of the month, September 30th of 1998. This happens to be a Wednesday. And I didn't load up the page, so give me just 1 second here. Luckily I had the browser up. I got this freaking old, like 8-year-old computer or something. I'm surprised it still works. About to be phased out of Windows though, because you have to upgrade to Windows 11, and this one isn't able to. Anyway, of course we start at midnight. We got Nick at Night going on, of course. A lot of these shows I've never seen or only seen a couple times. Mary Tyler Moore Show, Taxi, Newhart, Dick Van Dyke Show, Bob Newhart Show. Then we got one I've seen a bunch of episodes of, The Brady Bunch. Then we got The Wonder Years, which you figure I would have seen. It was in the 80s, but I never seen that. Happy Days, I love that one. Laverne and Shirley, never really seen. I Love Lucy, one of my mom's favorite shows. Bewitched, one of my wife's favorite shows. Then we got Nick News Special Edition, Stranger Danger. So it must have been warning kids about strangers. I mean, it's a good thing, but most kids turned off Nick News. But it was on 5:30 in the morning, so if they're just getting up for school, if they got to get up particularly early for school, which 5:30 wasn't even sometimes all that early. I remember getting up at 6 in the morning and watching the Munsters on TBS for like an hour. But on here at 6 was Inspector Gadget. Can't go wrong with that. But I was always watching the Munsters because I love that show. And then at 6:30 we got Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon. 7 we got Real Monsters, one of the great Nicktoons. 7:30 another Nicktoon, Rocko's Modern Life. And 8 o'clock you're on Nickelodeon, Charlie Brown, which is just, you know, Charlie Brown and the Peanuts gang and Snoopy on Nickelodeon. And then 8:30 we've got Rugrats, and then at 9 we start Nick Jr. because most of the kids are in school by then. So turn over today to the preschoolers. We got Little Bear, love that one. I watched that when I wasn't in preschool. I don't care. Then we got Blue's Clues, of course, the original host Steve, the only host in my mind. Then we got The Busy World of Richard Scarry. I love that cartoon. All the animals running around, and the worm and the apple in the car. Then we got Muppet Babies. Had to do it. Always have to do it. I love that cartoon. Then we got Gullah Gullah Island. Learned so much about the Gullah culture on that show. Then we got Busy World of Richard Scarry again, along with Little Bear, Blue's Clues. Then we got Rupert. I hadn't thought about that one in a while. Then we got Allegra's Window. It was introduced the same day as Gullah Gullah Island. It wasn't as good as Gullah Gullah Island, but I still liked it. It's puppets, and, you know, Allegra was the main character, and, you know, it was like seeing the world from her window. Then we got Inspector Gadget again at 2 because we're coming out of Nick Jr. because some of the kids are starting to get home from school. Then we got Tiny Toon Adventures. Love that cartoon. You're on Nickelodeon, Charlie Brown again. Then we got one of the 3 original Doug Tunes. Nicktoons, Doug Tunes. Yeah, they're Doug Tunes. Of course, I should have mentioned earlier, Rugrats is one of the 3 originals too. The other one is Ren and Stimpy. I don't know if we'll see it on this lineup, but that was the other of the 3 original Nicktoons. Then we got Clarissa Explains It All at 4, you know, because all the teens are home. I love that show. Garfield and Friends, which I'd forgotten they'd had on Nickelodeon during a certain time. Rocko's Modern Life again. Figure It Out, the game show with like Nickelodeon celebrities where they're trying to guess what the kids or the families have done and they're trying to win prizes by stumping them by not having them figure it out. Then we got Tiny Toon Adventures again, Doug, Rugrats. At 8 we got Hey Arnold, which I've mentioned before, and people like, what? I didn't really like Hey Arnold, sorry, but it was definitely probably at its peak at this time. Then we got The Journey of Alan Strange, which I've only watched like 1 or 2 episodes, didn't really care for it. And then we're back to Nick at Night. So I was surprised, like during 1998 was when they were phasing out a lot of the good stuff. Like there's no Double Dare, there's no Wild and Crazy Kids, Nick Arcade, Guts. You know, even though some of those shows have been over, they've been showing them on reruns. You know, they just started to phase them out during this time. Really getting towards the end of Nickelodeon. Of course, 1999 and SpongeBob would be the freaking death nail in that coffin. Yes, I cannot stand that freaking SpongeBob. Ugh. Anyway, I don't care if I lose viewers over that. Anyway, back at Nick at Night, we've got Brady Bunch, The Wonder Years, Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, I Love Lucy, and In the Day with Bewitched. So that's the Nickelodeon lineup. Getting back to my stuff to talk about here, TGIF. Their big show that they were trying to lead with was like the return of the Olsen twins to ABC. For their show, it was called Two of a Kind. They were 12 years old, and it was actually both of them in it, not just the twins playing one character. But it only lasted 1 season. You had a hype behind it, but I guess the story behind it wasn't that good or something, because, you know, it only lasted the 1 season. But like, it was like their lead show. You know, it should have been Boy Meets World, which they would end up being the next season, but that really should have got that spot. But no, they were trying to lead with that, and you know, it was, like I said, the big return of the Olsen twins, the ABC Friday nights, and you know, it kind of flopped. But next was Boy Meets World, season 6. The first episode aired this month. It was the cliffhanger from the season 5 where they were at the graduation and Topanga proposed to Corey. Well, it ends there, and then, you know, picks up right there where they're both, it's just them two sitting there after graduate, still on the stage, and Corey's the shocked look on his face. He eventually says yes, and they actually decide to go elope, but then at the last minute they decide not to, which, you know, it's a 2-part episode itself. So the second part kind of gets into that, and you know, the parents are mad at them, you know, particularly Corey's mom's like mad at Topanga, like, why would you talk my boy into this? And, you know, really led to some friction there, but they ended up deciding to not elope and, you know, get married later on and, you know, focus on college, which is where they're about to get started. And then there's also the second episode of that where Mr. Feeney announced his retirement, and Eric was going off about that. Of course, Mr. Feeney would end up like literally going back to college and being in class with them before the dean, which he would end up marrying, which is actually William Daniels' real life wife. They'd been together like 50, 60 years. But anyway, he ended up being a teacher at that college. But yeah, that was the start of that season. And then next episode was Sabrina the Teenage Witch season 3, which was their like lead show, but like I said, they should have made it Boy Meets World, but they made it that Two of a Kind crap. And then the 4th show was Brothers Keeper. It lasted only 1 season, and I'd never even heard of it before. If you have fond memories of it, I'm sorry. One news item to talk about was a big one for today's world. Google was officially incorporated as a company on September 4th. I don't know exactly when it was invented, but of course everybody now knows Google. You know, you use it for everything. Google has its own computers and phones, and it's the #1 search engine, and has the Gmail and all this other stuff. You know, I think they're getting out of hand, just like everybody else is with the AI stuff. Because if you ever look up something and they have the AI results, a lot of times it's wrong information. If you actually go down and search for the actual search results, you'll actually find factual information. A lot of times the AI stuff is off, so I would caution anybody that is like on it. I've seen people use Google AI like in online arguments before, and people would be like, you know that Google AI isn't always right, and you know, because like it's, you know, they get it from other sources, but just AI is not everybody thinks it's going to take over, and it probably will one day, but it better get a lot better before then. But talk about some kids' meal toys. McDonald's, of course, the most well-known for the Happy Meal toys. They had the Disney video favorites, and these were various Disney characters on these like little vehicles with like wheels, but the vehicle itself was like a little VHS, looked like a VHS cover. Those classic Disney VHS movies with that, I don't even know what the material is. It's like plastic, I guess. Almost feels like there's foam inside of it. But you know what I'm talking about, that the VHS tapes came in. But includes The Spirit of Mickey, Lady and the Tramp, Pocahontas, Mary Poppins, The Black Cauldron, and Flubber, which is one of their newest movies that had come out. Love that movie. Burger King had the Nickelodeon, which was which I guess was during that lineup. But it was the Nickelodeon was Nickelodeon from Sunday to Friday, from 8 to 9. It was targeting preteens and teenagers. Because like I said on that, I think I exited the page, but I think Hey Arnold, and I can't remember what the second thing on there was. But yeah, those are marketed more towards preteens and teens. But anyway, of course that wasn't Saturday. Saturday was 8 to 10 with Snick. But anyway, that Burger King had toys based on these, featuring shows from that time slot. Like there was a Hey Arnold toy, and I think My Cousin Skeeter had just started, and that was the name of it. The Wild Thornberries, just various types of toys from that. Wendy's had Snoopy and the Peanuts Gang toys. Various toys from Peanuts. A lot of them were Snoopy toys, and they had one that was create your own comic. And of course, all these kids' meals always ended up having like the 3 and under toy, which is something that couldn't be swallowed by the little kids, and something the little kid would want to play with. And Taco Bell had kids' meal toys this month. It was Space Goofs toys, and they were based on a Fox Kids show called Space Goofs. Not exactly sure what the toys were. But yeah, that's just some kids' meals toys. If you remember some of those, you can look up a lot of these. A lot of these things are for sale on eBay. If you wanted to get a collection of all these like 90s kids toys, and they're not what you're expecting, like hundreds of dollars. Some of the stuff goes for $5 or $6, and some of it's still in its original bag. I mean, I don't know if the market's fallen off for that, or just there's such an abundance of it. But you realistically, for probably under $1,000, you could probably get a complete set of 90s toys from like one restaurant. You can get I'm sure there's probably some that are more rare that you're not going to be able to get it for that cheap. But for a lot of them, they really are cheap. The one movie that came out this month that I liked was like Rush. I was talking about before, was the movie of the year for our school year was Rush Hour. There are so many things quotable in this movie. You understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? I seen recently when they put this showed this movie on cable, they had to put a thing up saying this was filmed during a time when thoughts and actions, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was a freaking parental warning almost, like because of language they use, and it's not even like cuss words. Which by the way, they let kids cuss all they want these days, but if you say anything that could be even construed as racist, and of course it starred Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker, and the racism was Chris Tucker like making fun of Chinese people, and there was Chinese people that were laughing at this movie. Nobody was offended at this stuff like they are now. They had to literally put warnings so people don't get offended. Anyway, besides that, it was a funny movie. They ended up making 3 of them, I believe. Great movie. If you haven't seen it, you got to go back and watch them. See if you can find it not on cable so you don't get warned. I don't know if they cut anything out, but a few debuts for TV shows, of course, being September. Pokemon debuted September 8th. This was like hyped for months, and like I said, I was never a Pokemon fan, but Josh Travis and then later Clint was. But it always annoyed me. But they like hyped it forever, and like I remember watching the first episode with Josh and Travis, and they were like sucked into it. I was like, I'm not an anime fan at all. this show just didn't interest me at all. You know, cool concept where you collect things and everything, but you know, just not my cup of tea. TRL Live debuted on MTV. I wasn't watching then, but I got into that like towards the end of '99 and into 2000s. I really got into TRL and was watching it every day. But at this time, didn't have the music I liked, so I wasn't even watching MTV. Except for Celebrity Deathmatch, if you remember that show. I love that show. And The King of Queens, which I didn't watch then, but later on would go on to watch. I haven't seen every episode, probably not even half of them. But King of Queens debuted on CBS, and they ended up having 9 seasons. And then there's a show with Pamela Anderson as a star called VIP. This was like a detective agency or like a private investigators for like Hollywood stars, and this was just made for freaking teenagers and young adults to just stare at women barely wearing clothes. All I can think of. It was on at like midnight or 1 in the morning, and we'll just leave it at that there. I can't say too much about that show, but anyway. Move on to some video games. We're winding up here, I promise. A few video games came out that I loved. Well, a couple here. NASCAR 99 for Nintendo 64. Nothing like particularly like groundbreaking with that one. I just remember playing it a lot on Nintendo 64. I think it was the first ever NASCAR game I played. It was really cool. Spent hours playing that. NFL Madden 99 for Nintendo 64. I never played that one. I didn't really get into the Maddens until PlayStation 2 era. But NFL Blitz came out for Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 1, and that game, I've talked about it before on here whenever it came out for the computer. I think it was October, which is obviously the one following this, which I've already done. Because like I said, I don't do these in order. I randomly pick. But can't say enough good things about NFL Blitz. You know, the very first one, and you know, on through all of them. I didn't really play the one was called Blitz the League, where you know after NFL had taken their sponsorship away, not sponsorship, but after Madden got the exclusive rights to use the NFL in video games, Blitz couldn't use it anymore, and the 2K games couldn't do it anymore, which sucked because everybody knows the greatest football game of all time is NFL 2K5 for Xbox because you can use your own music on it. That's the only reason it beats out the PS2 version. But anyway, NFL Blitz is one of them games. It don't matter if you've never played football a day in your life. My kids were like 3 or 4 years old were beating me at this game, and not because I was bad at it, just because it's so easy to play. And it's the game where you can tackle them after the thing and pick them up, power bomb, and you know 30 yards for a first down, but it's like almost like nothing. Just I love freaking NFL Blitz. I wish they'd be able to bring it back. Madden would freaking get the NFL out of their butt, or the other way around, one of the two. But speaking of that, we're going to end talking about sports. Big time for sports because, you know, the very end of the MLB season, the teams that made the playoffs were the Braves, the Astros, Cubs, Padres for the National League. The Reds finished third place, 25 games back. For the American League, it was the Yankees, Red Sox, Indians, and Rangers. And this was also the year that the Diamondbacks and the Devil Rays joined the league. And leagues kind of got shifted around in order to make them even. The Brewers would end up going from the American League to the NL, joining the Reds division, the Central, but it ended up giving them 6 teams. Meanwhile, the American League West ended up having only 4 teams, so they eventually would even everything out by taking the Astros from the NL Central and moving them to the AL West. But yeah, it was a little lopsided there. But the big story of this year was the home run race, and I've talked a little bit about that. But it really was during this month that it was like all culminated. Of course, between Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, it would go back and forth. Mark McGwire broke the home run record on September 8th, hitting number 62. Of course, it was a 37-year record, originally held with 61 by Roger Maris. McGwire would end up with the record at the end of the season with 70. But Sosa also broke his record and had the record at various times during this month. He ended up with 66. But, of course, the record would eventually be broken by Barry Bonds, who hit 73 in 2001. And I know all three of those have been, accused of steroids, and I think have been proven they've used them. And, it is what it is. You could call it cheating. It probably is. But at the same time, this is what brought people back to baseball. I mean, you can use steroids all day, all you want. It's not like a button that instantly sends the ball over the fence, You still got to work out. Yeah, it gives you an unfair advantage, it seems. But at the end of the day, you still got to have skill to hit the freaking baseball. You can't just have the... That's why you don't see the power lifter freaks with the muscles that look like they're their arms are literally going to explode. You can't just send them out there to hit home runs. They might not even make contact with the ball. So there's certain skill involved, but I kind of go back and forth on that. But really, it's the home run race is really what saved baseball, in effect. After the strike of 1994, a lot of fans went away because they didn't even get a World Series that year. Because of the greedy owners, the greedy players, and all the agents and lawyers in the middle stirring them up. But, a lot of fans went away from baseball for a few years there. This is what really brought people back. But what's not widely talked about is that Ken Griffey Jr. was actually originally there with Mark McGwire, neck and neck in this home run race. It wasn't until June that Sammy Sosa joined the picture, because originally McGwire and Griffey were on pace, back in the first couple months of baseball to break the record, because you hit home runs at a certain pace and they project how many you'll have. They were both on pace. Sosa wasn't in the conversation, and then he ended up getting a bunch. Now Griffey kind of fell off, but he ended up with 56. And of course, famously, he never used steroids a day in his life, and still hit 56 home runs. Makes you think of what if he would have used steroids, but no. That's why Griffey has my ultimate respect, because he never used anything like that. Never got in any kind of trouble off the field. You never heard about him beating his wife, or doing drugs, or getting caught doing this, or having affairs, or just one of the all-time greatest just people. Not even baseball, just people. But the players of the month for this month were, of course, Mark McGwire and Albert Bell from the White Sox in the American League. And pitchers of the month, Randy Johnson and Rick Helling. Another thing of note that happened was September 20th, Cal Ripken Jr. took himself out of the lineup before the game started. Of course, this was during his Ironman run, where he'd set the record originally held by Lou Gehrig, where most consecutive games played, without taking a day off, which was amazing. What did his number ended up? 2,632 games in a row he played. And not just, was in there, but playing at a high level. Cal Ripken Jr., definitely a legend. And the Reds made history November 27th. It featured two sets of brothers in the infield, Brett and Aaron Boone, and Barry Larkin and his brother Steven. Which I don't remember Steven Larkin much. I don't think he lasted very long, but of course, Brett Boone did very well, and so did Aaron Boone. Ended up, a clutch hit. I can't remember if it was in the World Series or in the game to get to the World Series for the Yankees. And of course, he's the manager now, and everybody calls, "Oh, get rid of him." I hate when people watch baseball automatically just blame the manager for everything. Oh, this person didn't get a hit. Oh, take him out. It was the star player. Well, you would have said get rid of the manager if you would have took him out of the game. Anyway, for that, of course, football started in September, so the very end of baseball and the very beginning of football. The first month of the season, the leaders for the AFC were the Dolphins, Jaguars, and Broncos. Bengals were tied for last with the Oilers at 1-3, and these were the Tennessee Oilers. It was after they'd moved to the Houston Oilers had moved to Tennessee before they became the Titans the next year. But the Bengals ended up finishing tied for last in the whole NFL with a 3-13 record. That means they'd only win 2 more games the rest of this whole year. A terrible freaking time for the Bengals was the 90s. The Reds weren't too much better. If it hadn't been for winning the World Series in 1990, and then I think they got into the playoffs in 95. But other than that, not their best years. But the Bengals were absolute dog crap. That's where they became known as the Bungles. But the leaders for the NFC, it's a big list because there was a lot of ties and stuff. Cardinals, Cowboys, Giants, Packers, Vikings, Saints, and 49ers. And out of those, none of those would end up making the Super Bowl. The Falcons made the Super Bowl, but they lost to the Broncos. Like I said in the yearbook segment there, Broncos were the number one team because, everybody picked. It's pretty sad that they didn't pick the Bengals. But, I mean, I see why. I never gave up on the Bengals. I'm not one of those ones that just pick the team that wins all the time. For better or for worse, I've stuck with the Reds and the Bengals. Caused me more heartbreak than I should have had, but there were several stadium changes this year for football too. The Ravens moved into what was then called Ravens Stadium at Camden Yards, which is right up next to the Orioles Stadium, which was Camden Yards, or Camden Park, one of the two. But it's now called M&T Stadium, but it's where they've played at since then. The Buccaneers this year moved into the Raymond James Stadium, which I believe is where they're at now, unless they've moved since then. I think that's where they're at. And then the Oilers, of course, in Tennessee now, moved into Vanderbilt Stadium, which was like they would get their own stadium later on that was being built, but it was like the smallest venue in the NFL at the time. It really wasn't an NFL standard venue, but it was better than the one that they were at before. It was like I don't know, I can't remember the details of why they moved to Tennessee, but it seems like they should have stayed in Houston until that stadium was built. But anyway, talk a little bit about NASCAR. September getting towards the end of the season. Jeff Gordon won the Pepsi Southern 500 at Darlington, and he would end up going on to win the NASCAR championship that year. It was his third. Jeff Burton won the Exide NASCAR Select Batteries 400 at Richmond. I always like reading these names, they're funny. Mark Martin won the MBNA Gold 400 at Dover Motor Speedway, and Ricky Rudd, hadn't heard that name in years, won the Napa Auto Care 500 at Martinsville. But yeah, that's going to be a wrap on the sports. It's going to be a wrap on the episode. I'm sorry, this one's a long one. Especially the year. I didn't think the yearbook segment to take so long. But next time I'll be back with you. Hopefully next week. No medical emergencies or problems I have to deal with. But back to the year we were last week. Well, actually the week before. I was off last week. Episode 42. Episode 42 will take us back to August of 1993. This is the 7th trip we've taken through 1993, so we're getting close to the. One of these days we're gonna have a full year's worth of something. I jump around all the time, but one of these years we're gonna be done with a full year's worth of stuff. I mean, eventually I plan on doing all the years and all the months. But anyway, I was 9 years old at this time, getting ready to go into 4th grade. Mrs. Weiss, the world's greatest teacher. I just loved her so much. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this episode. It's been a fun one to talk about. Let me know if you got any comments or suggestions or anything. Be on the lookout for that bonus episode Friday, especially if you're a Tales from the Crypt fan. Hope some of your favorites made my list. If not, make your own list. That's the cool thing about this platform. Anybody can do this. I got a camera, I got a microphone, I got an internet connection, I got a simple video editor. That's really all it takes. You can shoot it on your phone even. I mean, that's the cool thing about this technology is anybody can do it, and which also makes anybody can do it, which makes it, hard to get people to watch it. But hopefully you guys that are watching are enjoying this and or listening. If you're listening on Spotify, sorry, I always forget about that. I barely have anybody listening on there, but it technically is a podcast, so it's supposed to be audio first, and that's why I've tried to stick to just talking and not many segments where I show things, but couldn't avoid it with the yearbook. Again, if you're listening on Spotify, check out the book. The Book of Faces. It'll be on there. I'm gonna get my face out of here. I'll see you next time.
Tales from the 90's never die. In our hearts they testify. where every tale begins. Tales from the crypt, marathon.